Hey everyone, hope you're doing well. Welcome to another edition of the Nonprofit Leadership Studio. And we have a great guest tonight. Tonight we have Dorothy Gibbons from The Rose. And Dorothy, how you doing?
Good.
Very good. So this is the first class in our new season here. So we're really excited to have you. So first off, tell people sort of like, there's the whole idea of the elevator speech, right? You get on the elevator and someone says, aren't you with The Rose? What does The Rose do? What do you say?
Well, I say The Rose is about providing access to care for every woman who needs breast health care. And that means mammograms and ultrasounds and biopsies and treatment, anything that has to do with breast cancer or breast disease. That's what The Rose is all about.
And how long have you been doing that?
30 years.
Wow. And have you been the CEO for 30 years?
I've been the CEO for 30 years.
And you started when you were 10?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
So where are you from, Dorothy? Are you from Houston?
Pretty much. Been here most of all of my life, yes.
Yeah. And you went to college here in Houston?
Yes.
Where'd you go?
U of H.
U of H?
Yeah.
And what led you to doing this work?
You know, it's part of that thing that sometimes we get moved into nonprofits when we have no idea and we have no particular interest in it, because I was very much in healthcare.
Yep.
And I was in a for-profit situation. I was working for HCA. I was a part of their faculty, their management faculty, as well as being a PR director at their flagship hospital. So nonprofits, that was not on my radar at all.
Yeah.
But in the mid-'80s, we were seeing a lot of women. We opened a breast center there. I had the wonderful opportunity to work with a great physician, Dr. Dixie Malillo, and she had such a passion for breast cancer and doing it right. And so we opened a breast center there at the hospital, and over again, we were seeing women with late-stage disease. And when you are looking at that woman and you know the only thing that you're going to be able to do for her is to hold her hand while she dies, there's this part of you that just says there's got to be a better way.
Yeah.
And so we met a wonderful woman named Rose Kushner who told us to get off our duff and start doing something about it. And one thing led to another, and we started The Rose.
Wow. And you started it with a physician?
With a physician,
Yeah, who is also as committed as you.
As committed as I am, yes.
Yeah.
And great volunteers and great support people at the very beginning.
Tell me about the growth of The Rose. You started with a budget and a staff, and you are today what?
We started with, our first fundraiser was a bachelor's auction, and we sold men for The Rose. I'm embarrassed to say that now, but we did, and we raised a whole $7,000. We opened with donated furniture and a donated space, and today we're an $11 million organization. We are serving 40,000 women every year. We are reaching women in 35 counties in Southeast Texas.
Wow. And how many staff do you have?
About 120.
Wow. So really from 2 to 120.
Yeah. Well, remember, I wasn't on staff back then. I was a volunteer. I did all that for 5 years.
Wow.
My first employee, I would never have claimed being first employee, was a tech, was a mammography technologist. And we had volunteers to run the front desk. So, yes, we started from 1 to now.
Wow, that's amazing. So, this is obviously a leadership class.
I understand.
So if you had to write a book on leadership, what would the first chapter, or what would some of your favorite chapters be within this sort of the Dorothy Gibbons leadership guide?
Well, it's interesting, Bob, because I know you don't know this. I have written a book, and it's about to be published next month. And it is about The Rose first, but then it is about leading an organization in this nonprofit climate. And that leadership that I see, and the whole thread of it that comes out over and over again, is about being flexible, trusting your gut. And I know people hear this all the time, but sometimes you take risk and you don't even realize they're risk. So it's following whatever that keeps you on mission. And especially in this nonprofit world, it's real easy to get off mission. But as I wrote that book, and as I thought about what is this going to say to a potential person in nonprofits are not easy.
Yeah.
It is not all this touchy-feely, oh gosh, don't you feel great at the end of the day? No, I'm exhausted. But, it's about what it takes to really run an organization that has a lot of different rules to play by.
Yeah.
And so in my leadership hat, when I put that on, I realized that a whole lot of this is being able to move with the flow and to realize, especially in the nonprofit arena, there are fewer guarantees than there are in any other type of business, and more needs than you'll ever be able to address.
Talk about that a little bit, because so many times when we talk about leadership, you hear people from the business sector say, oh, well, maybe for-profit leadership is much tougher than nonprofit leadership. And frankly, I don't know what's tougher, but I know it's not easy to be a nonprofit leader. Talk a little bit about that.
I would challenge that it is tougher. I can not offer my employees X number of dollars because they made more widgets for that day. They could run 10, 20, 40 more women in a day. They're not going to make any more money. So I don't have such a thing called profit sharing that I can get their ownership with. You hear that term a lot these days. The only way I can even motivate, encourage, ask them to help me with this mission is because they're buying into the mission itself. So I think that's one of the first things we have to deal with is our structure of rewarding our employees, and your employees are what get the job done, so let's get real clear on that, is very different. I think also we have different rules we have to follow. And, I have to run a business and I have to run a nonprofit. And throw in the middle of all that, it's a healthcare nonprofit. So, just that has its own whole set of rules and regs. But within that, I have different standards I have to live by. I cannot not show a year that I at least break even. A lot of companies can go a few years and say, no, we're not doing real well, but the stockholders are understanding. I have people to take care of. I can't do that. And I have funders that aren't going to fund me if I don't at least break even. So I have to put in a lot of good business practices, and I have to be sure that I am running a business as well as a charity. And frankly, I think that takes an awful lot of skill and maybe a bit more.
And I think, and you've alluded to this, the whole idea of running a business, running a nonprofit, but then having to raise the money on top of it. I mean, a lot of times you'll hear, well, there's fundraising staff, but the fundraising staff starts with the CEO. Talk a little bit about that, about fundraising for the Rose.
Well, with us, we don't have any, we do not have an endowment. So, and there are some nonprofits that have that structure, and that gives them a little bit of breathing room. So I'll start there. So every year we start at zero, and every year we have to raise $3.5 million. And, that has to be done through multiple ways, through grant proposals that I still write with some great writers helping me. And we have to do it with direct solicitation. But I guess what you're saying is it's the CEO that has to be able to ask. And that is hard sometimes. In my early years, it was very hard. And so it took me a long time to make that transition of I'm not asking for me, I'm not asking for the company, I'm asking for the women we serve. And you also have to understand who you're talking to and why they might be interested in helping you. And I think the one thing that all of us have to be careful about is just shutting up and listening and knowing that that person could give you an idea about why they want to help you, but you'll never know it if you don't listen.
Your organization is an organization, in a sense, for women, though I'm sure men come, but it's a women's organization. The leadership is women. Most of the employees, women. How is that different than running a different nonprofit or a different organization?
Well, there's, I think.
No different. I'm sure it's no different at all.
No, I think it is different because someone is either pregnant or PMSing or menopausal every day.
Yeah.
So there is, this whole range of hormones that's going on. But if you want to get something done, you get a bunch of women together. And I'm a feminist. I'm not ashamed of that, because I've seen those women move mountains to get our patients through. I think the other difference is I have a lot of people say, well, in a male environment, it's more team, it's more, all the things that they say about that. Maybe so. We don't go and golf afterwards to be with each other. We may babysit someone's grandchild. But
I'm sure you go out to drinks just as often as I go out for drinks, right?
Probably more. So if there's difference, it's just in perhaps the way we communicate.
Yeah, and I know that in this class they're going to be looking at Sheryl Sandberg's, her Lean In TED Talk. When you see women like her talk about sort of the challenges of women's leadership, are there reflections that you have in terms of as a woman leader?
I think she had some very good points. And I absolutely understand where she was coming from with a lot of that. But I also say some of the privilege she had and some of the ability she had to continue to lean in, it's not available to most women.
Yeah.
And that's where I have a little problem with it.
Yeah.
There's just, I know too many women that are working too hard that can't do some of the things that she asked just because of the financial or the other responsibilities they have.
So often, Dorothy, when you and I look at other nonprofits around town, we see the importance of leadership, right? You and I know nonprofits that should be flourishing, but because of a lack of leadership or poor leadership, they're not doing as well. We see other nonprofits that have grown because of good leadership. When you see that happen, how do you react to an organization that's sort of underperforming? Do you see those around town? I see that all the time. I'm wondering, do you see that?
Bob, I'd be very careful about making a judgment on any other nonprofit because I really don't know what's going on internally or externally for them. I know many times our partners have looked at us and thought that we were very, very strong, and it could have been the worst year of our life.
Yeah.
And so many times it is the funding you have that really dictates how well you perform. And so, I'm not sure that I would be the one to judge that.
Yeah. I'm always happy to judge, though.
I know, but I'm not. When you're one of the small guys, you have to work with everybody, and boy.
Tell me this, when you look at some of the nonprofits that you see as particularly effective, what are the things that they're doing well?
I think the things they're doing well is always staying on mission and looking at how their mission can be in other places, other ways. I think it's amazing how many have filled a need or seen a need long before it became obvious, and that's what gave them that edge. That's why they were ready. That's why they were poised and could say, we're ready, we're shovel ready, we can do this. So I think that's one of the things that I see in those that are really excelling.
Any other sort of common characteristics of good nonprofits for you?
Well, they have great leaders. They usually have one or two board members that is right there with that entire understanding. Not a whole board. I don't think anyone has a whole board that's doing everything that
we want that.
They think they could do, right. But I think they all have at least that one cheerleader that's in there.
Let's talk about that, the board, because that's such an important component of the nonprofit world. When I get together with a lot of nonprofit CEOs, if we're complaining about anything, it's usually board and or personnel, right? So talk about the board, its role in the nonprofit, and its importance.
I know we complain about our boards, but I have to remind myself all the time, this is a volunteer position for them.
We're not complaining about our boards. Our boards are great.
Our boards are great, right. But I do think that's one thing we have to remember. It is not their day job.
Yep.
And so many times I think we expect our board to know everything there is to know about what we're dealing with, what's the climate, what's the environment. And I think that's difficult when we put too much emphasis on that. I think your board is there to allow you to have the vision that you need to have. I hear this all the time about, well, it's a board that has a vision. No, it better be that CEO that has a vision. If they don't have it, then who's going to? But that board needs to be there to provide that space that allows that vision to be talked about, to be, grown, to be nourished, whatever. And they're also there to say, wait a minute, So I think their biggest, besides the fundraising and all the things that we hear, besides the opening the doors to the places that you may not have that access to, now that's a basic, that's a given. But I think from a leadership point of view, who else are you going to talk to? When it gets right down to it, and I know we go, oh, you can't talk to your board. Well, maybe sometimes we need to.
How big is your board at the Rose?
I have 15 people on our board.
Wow. And of those 15, some are obviously more involved than others. Yeah. And do you think a bigger board is better? Because there's differences of opinion, right? The next guest I have will say a big board is better. What do you think about the differences between a 15-person and a 30-person board?
A 30-person board would drive me nuts.
Yeah.
Because part of our job as a CEO is to also do your board stewardship. I don't know many people that really could do a 30-member board very well, or they'd have to have an awful lot of staff support.
Yeah.
So,
how often do you visit with each of your board members individually?
Maybe 4 times a year.
That's a lot. That's good.
That's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. But they appreciate that, though, don't they?
Board
members love it.
The years that I could not do that or didn't do it, and you have to remember what regular means to them. Yeah. It's not once a year. I was always once a year. I always thought, well, that's a lot, but that's not enough. It means so much. And it also allows you to be in that space where you're people and not board and CEO. It's good.
And how often does your board meet?
Monthly, except for December.
Wow. And how long is a board meeting, and what sort of stuff happens there for you?
It's about an hour and a half, and we do all the basics like any board does. We try to have a mission moment, and that's something I learned from other nonprofit leaders, and it may have been someone you and I know very well, but I never thought about bringing every board member, meeting a moment that was different maybe than what they knew we were doing, and that really always seems to set the tone. We're not big enough to have a lot of different committees, but I certainly want to have our board being the ones that know what they need to hear about and what they want to hear about. So it's more discussion.
Yeah. I hear a lot of nonprofits say, I wish my board were better at fundraising, or I don't really have a fundraising board. How instrumental is your board in helping raise money for the Rose?
I have some amazing folks on our board that have open doors. It's up to me to keep the doors open. And they're really very much involved in our corporate and in our individual giving. I don't have a board that's necessarily, and it's not always expected in that foundation grant arena. They do not connect in that area.
Your staff, who reports to you on your staff? What does that sort of organizational structure look like at the Rose?
Well, a few years ago, I brought in a COO, the best decision of my life.
That is a good decision.
Then I moved everybody under her, except for my chief development officer and my assistant.
So reporting to you, your assistant, chief development, and COO, and then everyone else sort of falls under the COO. Very nice.
Very nice. 30 years, I deserve it.
Yeah. Outside of, I want to talk a little bit about motivation.
Okay.
So outside of the women that you serve, which is an important part, for me, it's all about children. For you, it's these women that you're serving. But what else sort of makes you get out of bed? What's your motivation for getting out of bed outside of that service component?
Ooh.
I know, it's a tough question.
Well, because the service does rule. And what I think about the most is how difficult it is after a few years when you don't feel like you're making a difference. And I think that's important for folks to know. You'll hit those times. So not very long ago, I had that, well, golly, you know, what difference? And I had someone just really say to me right up, said, well, why do you think only you can make this difference in our systems? We're talking major system changes. You're making a difference here. You know, so I think sometimes it is that challenge of, well, maybe today I could do something different in that system. Not just the women we serve, because those stories are just wonderful, and I mean, they're heart-wrenching. But I'd love to have a time when we had a different system for those women. I'm taking care of the ones that fall through the cracks. Come on. We don't need any cracks. We got enough things to handle around in this life. But in the system world, that's what seems to be motivating me more now than before.
If we were to bring in some of your favorite staff members, maybe your COO and your development officer, and say, what is Dorothy's leadership style like? What would they say?
Well, they tell you that I have a lot of conversations with them that they never heard of. So I don't know what that is with leadership style, but I will say, now surely I talked to you about this, and they will say, yes, you did, probably in your dreams or one morning. And I think they will say that I kind of expect them to always be in tune with what I'm needing. I think they're also going to say that my leadership style is usually hands off until I see it's not getting done. And then I get in with all feet. And I think they're also going to say that I'll talk about things, as every leader should, that they can't even see yet, and they're always amazed when they come around. So it's kind of fun at times. Most of the time it's just work.
Yeah. Do you find that your style over the years has sort of mellowed out a little bit?
No.
Really? You're the same? You're just as intense as you used to be?
Oh, no, I'm more intense.
You're more intense?
I used to be a lot nicer.
Really? Talk about that a little bit. Why is that?
Because it's this thing about, you know, we've got to change these systems. And so I watch my staff, and I don't mean I'm intense in being unreasonable with expectations, even though we've had many years where we have outperformed the year before, and my staff has worked at the same amount of money with no other financial motivation except the work we're doing. So I think that says something. But I think when I see my staff glaze over is when I'm on my soapbox about something that, yes, they'd love for us to be able to change, not within the organization, but out. And they'll it's almost like if we have a funder, or if I'm talking to someone, it's almost like they're over there ready to throw the net on me to say, okay, that's enough, Dorothy. You don't need to talk anymore, you know. So I see, I am more intense. I know I am.
This afternoon I went to lunch, and two of my newer staff members said, no, we see you as sort of laid back, and the woman who'd worked with me for 10 years just like burst out laughing. So I was wondering, maybe I'm mellower, I don't know. So talk about organizational culture, the importance of the organizational culture and what it's like at the Rose. And what do you do to set that organizational culture, or do you do anything?
I think we have, these last few years, had to really work very hard on attempting to change our culture. And that's been a real challenge. And because I did set that culture, and you know, I continue to set it, as every leader does. Yeah. But we were always so geared to our uninsured. You know, we always could identify with our lady who didn't have the resources. We just had such an affinity for that. But in all of that, we failed to realize that it is our insured woman who helps us be able to take care of the uninsured. And I don't know that our culture, and I mean, and I'm being very candid, was necessarily as welcoming or as nice or as, you know, overly nice over here, nice here, but we've had to make a little bit of a switch because now our funding has shifted a lot, and it is that insured woman who is letting us take care of more uninsured. And I know our staff has had to go through a whole change there, and that's been, we call it cultural change, but it was so much easier to take care of someone who needed help as opposed to someone who expects to have a lot of great services and a lot of great customer service and a lot of all the other things, and maybe even more demanding than we'd ever have over here. Yeah. So, and again, I'm being very candid. My team's worked with it well, but you know, when your whole focus is on the uninsured and then you must shift almost overnight, it's a biggie.
You talk about insured and uninsured, and we live in a state that has decided to not expand Medicaid, and not to
sure
cover,
you don't want to get that net?
and not to cover so many people who need to be covered. How does that affect your business, and how does that affect your clients?
How it affects my business is most people think that everyone has insurance, which is a bunch of...
Right.
Okay. And as we looked
have the
at
highest percentage of adults that are
highest
insured
percentage.
in the country. Yeah.
I did my own self-assessment within my own population, 22,000 women that we had seen over the last 3 years. Half of those women, their salaries, their financial status fell in that group that was supposed to be able to turn to Medicaid expansion. So they still have nothing. The other half, there was only about 15% of them that could have even considered going into the marketplace exchange. So what am I left with? Same population, same women needing, same financial needs. But in the outside community, what we're hearing is, well, everybody has insurance now. Why should we give to the Rose? There's no more need.
You really hear that? Wow.
We really hear that.
Yeah.
We really hear that. People can get insurance now. Why aren't they getting it? They must not want it. No, it's not that at all. So it has made fun. And when I talk about the last few years with the fundraising, that's what it's been about. It's been about they're not just not supporting the Rose, but they're not supporting some of those groups that were also supporting us. They're saying breast cancer for low-income uninsured women isn't an issue anymore. Everyone has insurance. Anybody can go anywhere.
So of the 40,000 women that you serve every year,
10,000 are uninsured.
And if we had Medicaid expansion, how many more women would you be serving, do you think?
Oh, I think there'd be a lot more.
Yeah.
I think also this is the underlying real value that we forget about. That woman who shows up at our door with a stage 3 cancer, or with cancer fungating out of her skin, would not have waited that long.
Right.
And we might have caught it back over here when it was stage 0 or stage 1. Here, there's not a lot we can do. Her options are so limited. The cost of her treatment is so expensive. Over here, man, she could have had the minimal amount and been on her way. So, that's the real loss in so much of this.
When you think about the work that you do, Dorothy, and you see a lot of the young people that come to work at the Rose, how do you identify talent that you think is sort of ready to move up in the world and move up at the Rose within the organization?
I think
and what do you do when you identify them?
I think we've had a lot of internal movement. I have one of my employees that's now a patient navigator, which is a great job for any woman who is bilingual, especially because it pays well. But she started way back over here as someone who was making maybe $6 an hour, answering the phone. Then she moved to her sponsorship. She teases me about how she had to start at a fold-up table, that set off the kitchen, and there was nowhere for her to work. And now, of course, she has her own office. But I think a lot of what motivates us is to help our employees grow has to do with they have that interest first. they're showing something extra. And remember, I work with a lot of professionals. My technologists are, very highly trained, very well paid, and they have a very big job. And so they could go to work anywhere. So when we find those that really want to do more, we've just had, I'm so proud of them. We've just had our second mammography technologist also learn how to do ultrasound. Doesn't sound like a lot. She doesn't need to do that. She's great over here as mammography. But because there's such a great service that we will be giving our patients by having both modalities in one person, she took all the extra classes. She pushed. Boy, we're right there to help them with that.
Let me ask one more question before I get to the Twitterverse to see what people have tweeted in. If I'm a new staff member, sort of a new professional, maybe I have a new master's degree, and maybe I'm going to be an entry-level development person, let's say as an example, what sort of salary would I expect at the Rose, or salary range maybe?
Well, now, new is at what level?
I mean, brand new master's degree coming in at entry level in development.
Oh, in development. You'd be mid-20s.
Yeah.
Master's degree doesn't mean much there. But you'd probably move pretty quickly.
Yeah, especially if you were good.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I don't have anybody at that level right now, but I know we are looking for someone, and they don't necessarily have to have the master's degree, but it's my entry level.
Yeah. How large is your development staff?
About 10.
10 people, yeah. All right, let's go to the Twitterverse here. Let's see what we have. This is interesting. Stephanie Bearfield wanted to know, did the women's unequal role in society play an important role, play an important part in you deciding to create the Rose?
Oh, yeah. I tell you, women
It's a quick answer.
today really are in such a unique position that we weren't 30 years ago, and we sure better take advantage of it.
Stephanie also wants to know, what's your best attribute as a leader, you, Dorothy?
You'd have to ask my staff.
Well, what would they say?
I don't know.
Oh, come on, Dorothy!
I think they'd say something about, I think they'd say passion.
Passion?
I mean, that's a word I hear with me.
A couple of these questions, I saw that. That's good. John Bogucki wants to know, does a leader in the non-for-profit sector require a different skill set than in the private sector? We talked a little bit about that.
I think they do and they don't. I think they just have to be able to manage those skills. They're all the same skills, but you manage them in how they're applied differently, if that makes any sense. Yeah,
sure. Moises Fabella wants to know, being in Houston with the largest medical center, best medical center in the world, how does that have an impact on you, if any at all?
Okay, that's a great question. I don't have enough time to tell you, but we always talk about here we are in the shadow of the largest medical center in the world, and yet there is such need. Now, I will tell you, great partners, great treatment, but nobody feels the need that we do. So how it impacts, keeps that place open, I guess, for us to continue.
Renee Brooks, to see a need, have compassion in common, and compassion is common, but to do those things takes courage and money. So obviously starting a nonprofit, having a lot of compassion, where do you start if you're starting a nonprofit and you need the money?
Well, I just told you how we started.
We
sold men.
Auction. So is that the answer? A little fundraiser to start?
I think, we at the same time we're writing grants. At the same time we were visiting with people asking for money. I think wherever you can find that money. I cannot tell you how many years I just knew we were going to find some sugar daddy to come in and take care of everything.
Yep.
And of course,
you still looking?
No. They just don't exist. You still have to have all those basics in place.
Yeah. You don't think that maybe there's one out there for you?
See, I'm a real dreamer. I think there's got to be somebody that gets this whole idea and that would help us in a big way.
So Corey Hinton wants to know, you've been a leader for 30 years, right, in the nonprofit world. What's the most effective marketing tool that you've used in those 30 years? I don't know how I would answer that question.
I want to go back to my people telling the story.
Yeah.
And them telling, and the people we serve telling their own stories. There's just nothing like having someone, for me or for a funder or any of them. We just had a wonderful story of a lady who was pregnant with her fourth child, and a volunteer at MD Anderson got her to us. Now, and because her cancer was so aggressive, they had to go ahead and induce. And I swear, what a wonderful story. Her husband and her have a family business that they're trying to keep alive, and they just didn't have insurance coverage. But I think it was somebody over here that knew about us that sent this person to us, and those 4 boys are going to have a mama for a long time. So that's the stories. I think it's always the stories.
Yeah.
But I can't tell them like the women do that have been touched.
Yeah. When you have fundraisers, do you bring those women out? Do you have films of those women? Sometimes
our fundraisers don't always have that venue, but sometimes our fundraisers are full of those women who are there as a supporter. I mean, they're the ones that bought the ticket to come in. So
a good buddy of mine is on your board. What would he say is the best leadership skill that Dorothy has?
Oh, that I really don't know.
Come on.
No.
Oh, you're just really tough, Dorothy. So John Holland wants to know, there are some ideas out there that a leader's only effective for so long. What do you say to that?
I will tell you what someone said about me. They said, at this time you would expect her to be slowing down and she's just speeding up. So if in my speeding up I'm still effective, then I don't know that we slow down.
Yeah.
I do see a lot of people getting different priorities. I do see that happening after many years, but I don't know if it has anything to do with being effective. I could be a lot more effective even after I leave the rows, because I can talk about things that maybe in this role right here I'm a little uncomfortable talking about.
Yeah. I see the whole idea of burnout, but I read an article recently that's talked about how we're retiring people who have accumulated all this knowledge and all these contacts.
Yeah.
And I do, I've considered leaving at different points, but every time I stay longer, it seems like more and more contacts, more and more connections, and it's just better for the organization in many ways.
I have friends who are 70 and 80 years old who have been in counseling that are reopening their practices because they're saying, I'm not through. I'm going to do this. Come on.
Now, when you start phoning it in, maybe you should retire. But I think there's, obviously you still have the passion there. So that's an important thing. Let's see. Jay Walter wants to know, knowing your clients and employees are predominantly female, how has the Rose invested male stakeholders in its mission? Because there are men who support you.
Because you had a mother,
a sister,
a daughter.
Yeah.
I mean, go around my board and every one of the men. Actually, on my men, I have one more man than I do women, and that's very odd. But they're all there because someone they loved was touched by this.
Ashley Lawson has a great question. Does the board interfere with the everyday operations of the organization? No. Never. Have they ever tried, Dorothy?
I think as you grow, there are times when your board is helping you get those everyday operations done, and they're very in there doing it. But as you get to a certain level, they know that their job is different now. Now, when we have issues, operational issues, a very basic one, we had a problem with our phones. Boy, my board was in there all over. I had somebody else call me and say they couldn't get through. Well, if that's interfering, then thank you God. I need to know when we have a problem out there.
I've had board members, recently some board member asked about something that I was ready to answer, but then another board member saying, we are here to hire and fire the CEO. The CEO runs the organization. It's sort of an interesting thing for a board member. But in a sense, that's really what the board is there to do.
That is what they're there to do.
Yeah, interesting. Let's see. How do you choose your board? That's interesting.
We have a saying around our organization that you didn't pick the rose picked you. And that's kind of how it happens. Mm-hmm. People come to us and are attracted to us. I will say that, and we were just talking about this yesterday because we brought on a new board person, I found the United Way Board Fair to be incredibly effective. Now, there's all kind of other ways, but just to get a brand new person that doesn't know anyone, and will bring you a different look, it's been pretty good it's been good to us.
Mm-hmm. Elsa Flores wants to know, when you look at the future of the Rose, what do you see being done that you're not seeing that's not being done right now?
I think the Rose has a unique opportunity to really step out there and be a leader in those health and mental and spiritual services, if we can put services with that, for women beyond childbirth. We deal primarily with women in their 50s, 60s. Now, I have lots of young women. The youngest woman we ever diagnosed was 19. The lady I told you about yesterday was 35. So we have lots of young women. But primarily we're dealing with women who are 40 and above. And once you get past childbirth, you have different health needs, but you also have different emotional needs. Just like what you were talking about, there's so many women that are saying, I'm not done yet. But, when you turn 60, you're called geriatric. So I think we have a great opportunity to maybe dispel some of those myths. That's what we've done for 30 years. And perhaps bring some of those services to that middle-class woman who maybe doesn't know that there's a lot of things out there that she could be taken advantage of. And I just think that's a great opportunity.
Stephanie Jones wants to know, as a leader, are you inspiring or do you manage by authority?
God, I hope to think I'm inspiring. But I do think if you don't own your own authority, because people are looking to you, it all stops here. Everybody else can be, they can have some part of that responsibility, but the accountability stops here. And I hope that I don't have any employee that doesn't know I'm going to have their back, and I'm going to take accountability for what needs to be done.
Very good. Let's see. We're getting a couple. Jay Walter again wants to know. Even for the insured, access to sensitive, passionate healthcare is hard to find. Tell me about, are there people who come in that can't get service because you just don't have the ability, or does everyone who comes through your door get service?
Oh, there's people that we have areas that we have a long waiting list and they're going to go somewhere else. But I'm going to go to what he just said.
Yeah.
In Texas, half of our counties do not have any kind of mammography service. And the other part of this is we live in a society that doesn't encourage preventative medicine and doesn't encourage women particularly to go out and take a half day to go do what you need to do. So, that's why we use our mobile so much and we take it to the businesses. But and I cannot tell you how many times we've gone to a business, everyone there is insured, and the women have not had a mammogram in 4, 5, 6 years. Always find breast cancer in one of those site visits, especially if we're doing a large company, because women just have not gone and taken care of themselves. So yes, it is, access to care is very multi-layered. That's a great question.
Yeah.
Someone who knows healthcare, obviously, but it's very, there's so many different barriers and issues.
Yeah. So a student named Aces, that must be his nickname, but Aces wants to know, and his specific question is, how does the board set salaries? So talk about how you set salaries and how does the board set your set salaries?
The board expects me to go out and get some compensation surveys done, and the board knows what we're dealing with within what our resources are, but it's my job to take to them and say, if we don't move this salary grade to here, we're going to lose some really good people and some really good talent. We must stay in this range if we want to keep the best there is to provide the mammograms. So that's my job, to tell them what the salaries need to be.
And how do they set your salary?
They are very generous, and many times I have to say, this is where this salary needs to be, because my board really does recognize the work that our people do, but we're all constrained with certain resources.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just the way it is.
Have you had years when you had to say, I can't take
Yes.
a raise because we're just not
Yes.
raising the money that we need?
I've had years when not only I did it, but my highest level team did it, and those are the years when, you're walking in faith.
Yeah. At ACES is Adrienne Pierce. She just tweeted me. So that's thanks for that question, Adrienne. Let me ask you. Stephanie, I'll ask her last question from the Twitterverse. Stephanie Jones wants to know: are your employees as passionate as you are?
Some of them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. For some of them, it's just a job.
Oh, I don't think it's just
Okay.
a job for any of them, but some of them don't. I don't think some of them have had enough time to hear the stories. You have to remember, a lot of our folks don't see that end result.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have the woman sitting in your office saying thank you. They don't have the woman running across the street when she sees the mobile van in the rain to tell the staff, you found my cancer at my church last year, thank you. I mean, so not all of our staff have that comes back to them. And quite frankly, when you have a young staff, and I have a lot of young people, it's hard for them to remember or to know just how difficult it is for a woman to have health care.
Yeah.
It's just not in their memory bank. So.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a couple of fun questions. This is sort of our final group of questions, Dorothy. So many times I have talked to leaders, and when I ask about work-life balance, everyone says, what do you mean? Do you have a work-life balance yourself?
I love my work.
Yeah.
But I love a lot of other things. So this stuff of balance, I don't know any area in my life that has balance. I'm as passionate about Mary Magdalene and all the things that go along with her and all the studies that we're finding about her as I am the rose. Huh. Do I have the time to give all that? No, but when I can, I do.
Yeah.
So that's something for me that's very important. I don't feel like it's all the work. I don't want to be, on my gravestone it to be, Dorothy Gibbons born Dorothy Gibbons and died nonprofit leader. I mean, I don't want to be known just for that, because there's too many other things in life to be excited about.
Do you, in terms of that work-life balance, are you someone who, when you get home, you put down your phone and your computer and you don't?
No, I have some staff that do, and I'm just, I'm really proud of them, because that works for them. It doesn't work for me.
It doesn't work for me either.
And I also have a place in the country that I go to, and it does not have internet service. So if we have I can get text. So if we have a crisis that I need to answer someone, I have to get in the car, and I have to drive to town, and I have to call that person back. Is that
so? You can get text, but not phone service?
Not phone service.
Wow.
But what's interesting, since we've had the ranch, I have realized that, staff can take care of some things that they might have sent to me, or some things can wait.
Yeah.
And that's been a little bit of a learning thing, yeah.
COOs, it helps to get away. I mean,
absolutely,
because you know that they're in charge. Who would play, when they make the Dorothy Gibbons movie in Hollywood, who would play you in a movie, Dorothy? I sent you this question.
No, I know you did. I thought about it earlier. I really did.
And what did you come up with?
I didn't.
You can't, and nothing now on the spot either, huh?
No, who would I can think
Probably
of all
Meryl
kind of,
Streep.
no, I think she'd play Dixie well.
Yeah.
Yeah, the doctor. I think she'd be fabulous at that.
So maybe Sandra Bullock or someone like that?
No.
It seems like whenever people don't know, they guess Meryl Streep or Sandra Bullock, so yeah.
I would tell you, and I can't think of her name right now, but the lady that was on Newsroom, somebody tell me her name. a lot prettier and skinnier. I mean, we all know that, but I loved
Mackenzie,
her.
what's her name?
Yes,
Mackenzie.
I loved her style and
Emily,
her in-your-face
Emily
and that.
something or-
So,
yeah.
yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. See, I'll accept that as an answer. Your favorite restaurant in Houston?
It's actually not in Houston.
Yep.
It's down south, and it's Cullen's. And
Cullen's, yeah.
It's in the Pasadena's
that's a huge
Clear
restaurant.
Lake
It's a nice
area.
place,
I
yeah.
love that place.
Have you been to that new barbecue place down in Pearland, by the way?
No.
No. Okay. Pearland's not near there, I guess. And your favorite sort of place in Houston that maybe a lot of people don't know about?
It's really my own backyard.
Yeah? It's a nice little secret place that really no one else is going to find because it's your backyard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. How often do you get out to your backyard in Houston?
A lot.
Yeah. The summer as well?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Very good. And do you have an idol? Person that you sort of feel like this is a good picture of leadership for me?
Lincoln.
Lincoln. Why?
I wonder how in the world that man was able to function with so many warring parties. And I have a lot of female heroes too, but for some reason I've become very, very fascinated with the whole Lincoln story lately. And that was truly a leader that thought through what is going to serve the country best. And it's amazing. There were so many times, he brought his greatest opponents into his cabinet. Mm-hmm. I don't know many of us that could do that.
Right. Yeah.
And dealt with them separately in a way that really to me spoke of such a different kind of leadership than we have now.
And they all hated it when he would tell stories.
They did.
Yeah.
His cabinet did.
Yeah.
But not the people.
Yeah, not the people, yeah. So your final question, if you're giving a piece of advice on leadership to a new potential leader, what's your final piece of advice?
Well, keep in mind you're growing into leadership all the time. Mm-hmm. You never, I'm a leader.
Mm-hmm. No, that's right.
So it's a great journey. There's always going to be those a lot better than you and those a lot worse than you. So just enjoy that ride while you can.
Dorothy Gibbons, head of the Rose, thank you so much. Thanks for being such a great leader in this community, and thanks for being part of our leadership studio.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. Hey, so that's it for this week. Next week we'll be back with another edition of the Leadership Studio. Until then, take care. We'll see you next time.